The problem is you're rewarding bad behavior. And I know the propaganda tries to turn this around against me. But the truth is I have been an outstanding father from day one. The people who are close to me that know this, people out in the community know this. So what has happened to me is a travesty.
How old are your kids?
They're 6 and 8.
6 and 8. So it's a tough age right now. It's a very tough age, especially not seeing their dad.
Well, if you heard their messages, you know, the way that my eldest tries to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And she's just saying, Daddy, I'd like to see you. And then her voice trails off, and she just doesn't know how to say this. She doesn't understand this. But she's obviously been brainwashed, and that gets to another subject known as parent alienation. It ought to be just father alienation because we're 90% of the victims. Father alienation occurs when the custody tactics take fold, or a substitute father comes into play, be it a stepfather, whatever, transient father figures that we see so much of in society today. And the real father, natural father, the one who loves his child, the one who will give his life for that child, is gradually systematically removed from that child through what I call a parenting hierarchy. The first person that takes over the child is the state. The state does this through this custody award, this battle that they create. They do it by statutory law. The second person in the parental hierarchy is the mother. That is because of childbirth. It's a natural thing. It's a fact of life. They give children their existence, and as a result, they have the primary caregiver capacity. No father can overcome that, so mother is number 2. Number 3, over time, this happens systematically over time. Number 3 becomes this attorney for the child. This is a person that's appointed to so-called advocate for the child. The person may never have had a kid. Person is maybe training in family court. Person doesn't know the first thing about parenting. And they're out for money. They're out for money. So the more controversy that this attorney for the child can generate, the more money that the attorney makes.
This is the law guardian.
Well, it's called attorney for the child now. That's the new phrase they give it. But we're evolving in this process. They're trying to give it better sounding words, but that's even a worse word. I prefer law guardian. I prefer no lawyer for my children because they don't want a lawyer for them, but they're forced to by the state. And therefore, the person advocating on their behalf is not looking out for their best interest. They're looking out for the lawyer's interest. You have law guardians that are making upwards to $100,000 and more. Entire careers and livings are made off of the exploitation of children. I've seen it time and again. And so now number 4 would be the school teacher or the school staff member, compulsory education. You have to go to school. We don't oppose that. There was a time when many did. They wanted homeschool. Yeah. But then the teacher takes a lion's share of time away from your children. Now the father's pushed to, and the teacher obviously gets a lot more time than the father does. Then comes the caregiver. Obviously, well, they talk about the child being tossed around between the parents. It's a lot easier to just get a babysitter or a caregiver, and so now the father's pushed to 6, 7. You get the in-laws, the family of the mother. And now the father is reduced to what I call a subclass status. This is where he's not even a parent. What he's doing, he's paying for the privilege of seeing his children. This is, for lack of a better word, government-sponsored child prostitution. I could probably, if I just made a lot of money and paid people off, I probably could get access to my children without all of these conditions that are imposed. And these conditions are terrible. I mean, when you know, the conditions can be just very barbaric. Yeah. And really, at some point in time, you chuck it all. You say, you know, this is an institution.
You wash your hands of it.
What you do is you just can't facilitate it anymore. You know, you're constantly being, what you're subjected to in that subclass role is an almost annual IRS audit. You get the state coming in, they go into your personal affairs, they go through everything you've ever spent, they can get in your personal life, what you do with your girlfriend, your new wife, they get into every aspect of your private life, and they're only doing it for the purpose of grabbing the maximum amount of money that can fleece out of you. There's no concern for the children in any of this.
Yeah. Hold tight. I have questions. Joe is on just quickly who has a question. I'll take a break and we'll come back and I have a lot of questions, and some of them that I'd like to compare to what, because I've been through a lot of what you're talking about, but I guess I took different steps. Joe, what do you have?
Well, I just don't understand what it has to do with just paying for the kids. You know what I mean? I listened to a lot of what's going on right here and caught a lot of things. Maybe this question was answered, but okay, so just pay your money. And that's it. Be done with it.
You want to respond? I don't think the system is fair, but you can respond to that.
Well, I don't know what he means by that. I mean, just pay to see my children? This is my whole thing I'm challenging. That's child prostitution. I mean, why should there be any payment? This is the thing. I mean, I provide for my children every day. I pay a mortgage. I pay taxes. I put food on their table. I'm developing a separate family unit, which is my right under the Constitution, under natural law. I have a right to establish a separate family unit. We've gone separate ways, as they say, move on. So why am I beholden to the other parent? For no other logical reason. There is no logical reason, but the only reason because of the manner in which I was born. I was born male, parent. I can't deliver children. I can't achieve the primary caregiver role, which is what they use to decide custody. So because of the way I was born some 50 years ago, I'm going to be forced to be beholden to this person for the rest of my useful life, during which that the process of going through my records and everything else are going to be used against me. The exploitation of a person through financial records is the way of control. You've heard the phrase, you've heard Ray Halberter use it, tax and destroy. Well, he doesn't want to be taxed because he doesn't want the power to tax is the power to destroy. We're doing that on a regular basis. We're doing it between parents now.
Part of my question for all of this is that we're told by our attorneys, and I'm sure you told this to clients, listen, I know it's not fair. It's the system. You have to do it. And I think that's what Joe is saying. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. And here it is. You are practicing of law, and I'm sure you have told people it's the system. So now, this whole time you've been a lawyer, now you're trying to say the system isn't right. I don't understand that.
All right, I'm gonna let you go, Joe, but go ahead and respond. I mean, I've been told it's the system. It's not fair. It's the system.
Well, Bill, there was the system in the 1950s where blacks went to separate schools from whites.
Yeah.
Now, that was the law in this country for 100 years. So the gentleman, I guess his name is Joe.
Yeah.
If you turn back the clock of time, you follow Joe's illogic, we would still be in separate schools today. And as we know, separate but equal doctrine, which was the law of the land, okay? It was a judge-made law. It wasn't through any statute.
Yeah.
The legislature, Congress didn't come together and say, hey, we're going to have separate but equal doctrine. That came out of a case known as Plessy versus Ferguson. And that was in the 1890s. It was apartheid is what it was. And they separated blacks from whites in the school and said, hey, these are equal schools. But as we all knew, over time, they weren't equal schools. The black children would look up at the children in white schools and say, why? Why don't I have the same textbooks?
Yeah.
Why don't I have the same resources? Because I will not be able to acclimate in life and give the same incentives on an equal basis as the folks in the other school. Roe v. Wade, using Joe's, again, illogic. If we followed the law back then, there would be no right to, I guess they call it privacy right today, there'd be no right to privacy under the Constitution. We would still be living under the 60s version of this privacy right, if it even existed back then. We could bring it up to the present day through cases that have worked their ways through the courts because somebody stood up and decided to challenge the system. We could look at it modern day. If you look at a police officer beating a person on the street, what are we going to say? Well, that's the system? Right. I mean, again, the beauty of my argument is
that's against the law.
Well, of course it's against the law, but well, wait a minute. Not if you look at it from their standpoint that they're trying to restrain a victim.
Right.
So there's a gray area there, Bill. And this is what we litigate for. That's why we go to court. And that's what I advise my clients. The beauty of what I'm doing is this is the American way. This is what we do. It's what defines us as a nation. And the day that we've pulled back with those kind of arguments, just accept the system, we would be living like we were in the 1700s. Susan B. Anthony. People forget the fact she was convicted. In the very court that took my license, and I walked into that court, there is a plaque and the entranceway to the appellate division in Rochester. And that plaque was a certificate of conviction of Susan B. Anthony. And what did she do? She voted. She voted in violation of the law. Now, for all you folks who follow Joe's illogic, women should not be voting today because it was the system. And if lawyers are going to advise our clients just to honor that kind of system, then we have a problem because this system, Bill, does not work. Right. It does not work, Bill, because I want to tell you something about these blogs that are out there, and we're looking at some of these. I don't get into that foolishness, but I'm getting copies of this stuff because I'm looking at some defamation of character issues. I got some free time now. We're going to find these people, the ones who are just making things up about me, and we're going to have them explain it to a court and a judge and a jury. Some of these people who I find out they got husbands ought to know about what's going on here because their assets may be placed in jeopardy if this defamation continues.
Are you
but
talking
these
about
blogs,
topics?
Well, topics, whatever they are. Yeah. But here, I'm not, onto that. But I have these slips shown to me because the more egregious examples will be monitored. But take a look at these things on topics, at least the things I've seen, Bill. The grammar, the spelling errors, punctuation. I mean, this is what we've got going on in America today. Right. It's pathetic. They don't even have any sense of pride. They don't have any sense of pride whatsoever in themselves that they put this nonsense out on the sites, and they can't even spell. I used to do my ex-wife's resumes because of the spelling and grammar errors, and she's a teacher. I mean, we have a serious problem in America today because children are not being taught English language. Now, how does that have to do with my case? It's in my case. If you look at a website, Larry Tenori does it. It's called Gotham City, and there's a link there to a 25-page letter I did to the Judicial Conduct Commission complaining about this custody decision in my case. The decision in